protesting, picketing, pandering, and promoting an anti-abortion message. Reverend Tom Capo, the Board of Directors, community friends, the UUA, local law enforcement, and your co-presidents are aware of your safety concerns for yourself, patrons to DUUC, and the youth of DUUC. We share your concerns. Reverend Tom, the Board of Directors, and your co-presidents are decidedly against taking any defensive approach. DUUC will play offense through our preparedness, readiness, and loving kindness. However, personal safety and our church are the #1 priority and concern for next Sunday. Barricades have been secured through the city of Naperville and local law enforcement. We have a plan to protect congregants as they enter our building from any number of parking lot locations. There will be escorts in each of our designated parking lots. Law enforcement will be positioned outside. Local law enforcement will establish ground rules and enforce those rules with the protesters. However, we, the board, designated church leaders, Reverend Tom, and staff have several requests and procedures that we will put forward in the coming days. Next Sunday will be different. We have a plan in place and are asking the congregation to live out our principles as UUs. We sometimes face very unpleasant and vehement opposition. We must remain strongly rooted in our principles, even in circumstances which may see us as a faith taunted, maligned, and excoriated. We must maintain our dignity and stand on the side of love next Sunday. We, the board, ask if you have questions or concerns about Sunday, October 15th, 2017, to please email Reverend Tom or co-presidents Dave and Julie Resch-Jelliff. We only ask this to make sure all questions are being directed to the correct individuals. Questions will be addressed and forwarded to the board for their input, concurrence, and/or knowledge. Thank you. David B. Jelliff, co-president.
Today, as we light our chalice, let us remember one of the sources from which we draw meaning, Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't sound as loud this morning and got a little cold this morning. I'm Reverend Tom Capo, minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. Before we move into our service for today, I'd just like to offer a few moments of silence for those who have lost their lives and who were hurt in Las Vegas this week. I went to a vigil this week, and so many people are deeply concerned about our country and our gun laws and about how we can move this country to a safer place. So I ask you just in the silence of the next few moments from your own hearts and minds to offer what prayers or thoughts that you wish to the people of Los Angeles and to all over our country who are struggling with what happened this week. Amen. This year, Yom Kippur began at sunset, September 29th, and ended sunset on September 30th. Today, we are going to explore this Jewish holy day, this most important of Jewish holy days, with history, with wisdom tales, with music. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are a new beginning. Why do we need a new beginning? Because we do things we wish we had not done. We say things we wish we had not said. We make promises we may regret. We need a chance to start over again. Beginning on Rosh Hashanah, and for the next 10 days, Jews think about the year that has passed and the year that is to come. On the 10th day, they celebrate Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It is the holiest day of the Jewish year, and Yom Kippur gives us a chance to ask friends and family to forgive us, to forgive those who have made us angry, and to make a new year better than the last.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in saying our mission statement, which is printed in your order of service and projected to my right. Please remain standing for the first hymn afterwards. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion.
The holiday of Rosh Hashanah has its early origin around 1700 BCE, in the time of Abraham and Sarah. Months did not yet have names, but were referred to by their position in the year: first month, second month, and so on. Abraham and Sarah left their home in Ur with their clan and headed for Canaan. At that time, people worshipped many gods, and God told Abraham to go to Canaan and found there a new nation, one that worshipped only that God. Abraham and Sarah were the first to worship their God alone, and the first Jews, then called Hebrews. Their God promised them the land of Canaan for their descendants. And as Abraham and Sarah and their clan journeyed through the desert onto the promised land, they marveled at their God's wonders. The sky grew order, the moon began as a sliver one night, grew to be round over succeeding nights, then became a sliver again, the pattern unchanging. This great order was seen as the work of their God. Abraham and Sarah and their clan celebrated the arrival of each new moon. One in the group, the trumpeter, blew short blasts on the ram's horn. Okay. The start of another new cycle of the moon. Then the people sat down together to feast and make merry. They celebrated Rosh Chodesh, the start of the new month, which came to be known as the New Moon Festival. In Canaan, Abraham and Sarah and their children and their children's children continued to celebrate Rosh Chodesh. In time, the new moon celebration of the seventh month became more important than all others. The reason is not known, but the appearance of the new moon in the seventh month was greeted with much horn blowing, long and loud blasts. The new moon festival of the seventh month would disappear in time, and Rosh Hashanah, New Year, would take its place.
Human beings are limited in knowledge. Even the most brilliant of us can know only so much. We are also limited in how long we live. All of us will die one day. We are limited in other ways as well. God is very different. God is all-knowing and eternal. God existed before the world began and will exist if the world should ever disappear. This idea is hard for mortals to grasp. How does a power that we cannot see pass judgment on us? Where does a power that is eternal live? The ancient rabbis looked for ways to make God more understandable to the people. So they began to speak of God as a king and as a judge, two mighty figures whom the people knew firsthand. They said that God convened a heavenly court on Rosh Hashanah, and the story of the heavenly court has come to be the most popular legend of the holidays, and one that well explains their meanings. At the heavenly court were angels dressed in white. Two of them acted as lawyers. Senagor was a good angel. He defended the people. Cadagor, the evil angel, accused the people. Cadagor was Satan. Open before God were three books: the book of life, the book of death, and the book of judgment. The names of saintly people who had been chosen to live another year had already been entered into the book of life. Wicked people were scheduled to die, and their names had been entered in the book of death. Everyone else is listed in the third book, the book of judgment. Throughout the 10-day period, the days of awe, each person's name comes up for review. Sanagor argues that the name should be entered into the book of life, and Cadagor wants it entered into the book of death. No one need to worry, though. Cadagor has never been known to win a case. Besides, the books stay open for all 10 days. They are sealed only on Yom Kippur, when the final judgment is made. People have a chance to change their fate if they have misbehaved. Anyone who confesses, atones, and repents during the days of awe can expect to be inscribed in the book of life.
Joseph in the Bible was the great-grandson of Abraham and Sarah. An episode in the Joseph story was the basis of a custom that later became part of the New Year's celebration. Joseph's brothers were jealous of Joseph because he was the favorite of their father, Jacob. One day, the brothers threw Jacob in a dry well and left him there to die. To remove blame from themselves, they set up a murder plot. They killed a goat, smeared Joseph's coat with blood, and showed the blood-stained coat to their father to make it appear that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. The goat had been killed to provide the brothers with a way to cover up their sin. It was made to take the blame and pay the price. In the years to come, the idea would be formalized in a special ceremony in the New Year celebration in Jerusalem. The idea of transferring sin to another has been entered into the English language through the word scapegoat. An innocent person who is falsely accused or made to take blame for the misdeeds of another. Joseph did not die in that well. He was rescued and went on to be appointed by the governor of Egypt and by the Pharaoh, as governor of Egypt by the Pharaoh. In later history, the Jews were enslaved by another Pharaoh, and Moses, a great prophet and leader, freed them and took them out of Egypt and led them back to Canaan. On their way, he formed them into a God-worshiping nation. Now, Moses taught the Jews the moral laws that their God wanted them to live by. He organized their religion by building the first shrine to their God, a tent that held the tablets with the Ten Commandments, and by naming his brother Aaron as high priest. Moses kept the nation together by seeing to it that the people obeyed their God's laws and kept their festivals, including the new moon festival in the 7th month. He taught the people the idea of atonement and how to atone for their sins. And then, when the Jews eventually came to Canaan and settled, they became farmers. They continued to celebrate Passover, which was their Exodus from Egypt freedom holiday. They also celebrated their New Year's festival on the 7th month. As farmers, they were dependent on their crops. They now have new occasions to celebrate. In early summer, when the first wheat was cut, they celebrated Shavuot, the festival of weeks. In the fall, when fruits and grapes were gathered, they celebrated Sukkot, the festival of booths. This holiday, which they celebrate on the 15th day of the 7th month, became their greatest festival. In time, Sukkot would become Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement.
Have you ever made a promise to God? Many people, children and grown-ups alike, make promises when they pray to God. Promises like, "Dear God, please help me pass my spelling test, and I will always do my homework." "Dear God, please help Grandma get well, and I will be nice to her." "Dear God, please let me have a new bicycle for my birthday, and I will share it with my brother." Now, if we can't keep these promises, we feel bad. Sometimes we are afraid we may be punished. Jewish people believe that God does not expect us to be perfect. So God forgives us when we say we're sorry, when we try to do better, when we are helpful to others.
But the Jews believe that God can only forgive us the promises we make to God. We also make promises to our friends and family. We promise our parents we will be helpful. We promise our friends we will play fairly. We promise our sisters and brothers we will share. We promise our teachers that we'll try harder. Sometimes we can't keep these promises either. On Yom Kippur, we have the chance to ask our friends and family to forgive us. It's hard to ask for forgiveness. It's hard to say, I'm sorry, but it's important to say it and mean it. It tells people we care about them. It's even harder to forgive others when they hurt us. On Yom Kippur, just as we ask others to forgive us, we must try to forgive them. When someone says to us, I'm sorry, we should say to them, that's okay. Let's be friends again.
There once was a poor widow who had many children, and they were always begging for food, but she had none to give them. One day, while she was walking through the fields, she found an egg. She called her children together. "Look, children," she announced joyfully, "I have found an egg. We have nothing to worry about anymore. And being a wise woman, I will not let us eat this egg. I will ask our neighbor's permission to put it under her hen until it hatches into a baby chick. And we will not eat that baby chick, but will let it grow until it lays more eggs, which will hatch into even more chicks. But we will not even eat these. Since I'm such a wise woman, I will sell them and use the money to buy a cow. But we will not eat the cow. Instead, we will let it grow, and the cow will have baby calves. And since I'm such a wise woman, I will sell them and use the money to buy a field. And we will have fields and cows and calves and chickens and eggs, and we will not be hungry anymore. And as the poor widow spoke, she turned the egg around and around in her hands, and suddenly it slipped and fell to the ground and broke. We are all like the country woman. We make many vows and promises. We say to ourselves, I promise to do this, and I promise to do that. But the days slip by, and often our promises do not lead to action.
Around 955 BCE, King Solomon, the son of David, built a magnificent temple in Jerusalem to replace the tent the Jews had built in the desert. The tablets of the law were transferred to the new temple. King Solomon chose the 7th month to dedicate the temple to their God. The custom of wearing white on Yom Kippur took shape in those early days of the temple. The high priest wore white, a symbol of purity. And Solomon, in urging his people to be pure, said, let's all wear garments of white, and the form of atonement that Moses had taught and was practiced. If people wished to atone for a wrong they had committed, they brought a goat to the temple. It was sacrificed on the altar, and one of many ceremonies as a sin offering. Around 400 years later, Babylonia conquered Jerusalem and destroyed Solomon's temple. In the style of the time, the Babylonian king separated the Jewish leaders. The kings, the nobles, the teachers, priests, and their families were taken from their land. He took them and brought them to Babylon, which was over 500 miles away, leaving the rest of the Jewish people behind. In Babylon, the Jews clung to their beliefs and customs. They no longer had a temple at which to offer sacrifices, but they set up schools and built synagogues to preserve their way of life, and they kept their festivals. They also borrowed some ideas from the Babylonians. You see, the Babylonians had names for their months, and the Jews named their own months. They called the 7th month Tishri. The Babylonians celebrated a day of judgment at which their various gods assembled to judge them and write their fate on each person on a tablet. The Jewish idea for the book of life began to take shape. Under a new rule, 50 years later, a second, less grand temple was built in Jerusalem. But the Jews who returned to Jerusalem were surprised at the condition of the Jews who remained behind. In the 50 years, the Jerusalem Jews had fallen out of touch with their roots. Without their teachers and scholars, they'd forgotten the laws and holidays. Much later, Nehemiah and Ezra called a meeting of the Jews on the first day of the 7th month. And Nehemiah was the first Jewish governor of Jerusalem. Ezra was a descendant of Aaron, the first high priest. They met in front of the temple, and Ezra read aloud the law of Moses. Ashamed of how much they had forgotten, the people began to cry. Nehemiah comforted them by saying, "Go your way and celebrate and share with those who have less than you, for this day is holy." That day in front of the temple was the first celebration of Rosh Hashanah, although the holiday was not yet named. The temple again became the center of celebration, and the 15th of Tishri, Sukkot, was a time of feasting, dance, and song. But the sages who returned from Babylon were distressed by the sight of such revelry. Where were their thoughts of God now? To balance the merrymaking, they introduced a sober note early in the month of Tishri. They declared the 10th month of the start of the new year a day of atonement. This slowed down the merrymaking. In the morning, people atoned for their sins by bringing lambs and goats up to offer for their sin offerings. But in the afternoons, they feasted and celebrated. The sages acted again. This time they created 2 separate holidays on 2 separate days. They declared the 10th to be Yom Kippur, a day of atonement, the first day of the month, the time when the new moon festival used to be celebrated. They made the start of the year Rosh Hashanah.
On Yom Kippur, a rabbi imagined he stood before God and had the following conversation. God asked, "Have you studied all that you should?" The rabbi said, "No." God asked, "Have you prayed all that you should?" Again, the rabbi replied, "No." God asked, "Have you done all the good deeds you should?" This time, too, the rabbi replied, "No." And God proclaimed, "You have told the truth, and for the sake of truth, you will be forgiven."
So the Jewish holy day of Rosh Hashanah, Hebrew for a new year, starts on the first day of the Hebrew month of Tishri. It falls sometimes in September, sometimes in October. 10 days later, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is celebrated. The 10-day period is known as Yamin Nora Amin, Days of Atonement, Days of Awe. They are days of awe because people feel fear as well as wonder and reverence. And people are fearful because of the special nature of the holiday. It is a time of judgment. The character of the holiday can be seen in various themes. The foremost theme is the kingship of God. Most of the holiday is spent in the synagogue. All prayers and hymns are directed to the greatness of their God. Their God is the King of kings, the greatest power, and the only power. The creation of the world is another theme, for it is believed that their God, finished the world of creation on Rosh Hashanah. This day is also known as the birthday of the world. The idea of judgment pervades the holiday. People are in awe, not only because they are being judged by their God, they must also judge themselves, asking, was I honest in my dealings with people? Was I stingy? Was I kind? Yet another theme is that of forgiveness. 3 steps lead to forgiveness: confession, atonement, and repentance. Each depends on the other. Confession is not enough. People must do more. They must atone for their wrongs by asking the people they have wronged for forgiveness. They must also feed the hungry, clothe the poor, perform other such good deeds. They must also pray to their God for forgiveness, but confession and atonement do not count if the 3rd step is not taken. Besides feeling regret, people must promise themselves never to repeat the wrong. They must promise themselves to return the path of moral goodness.
Long ago, in a small village, there lived a young boy. He had difficulty learning and could not read or write. As a shepherd, he spent his days watching his sheep and playing his flute, which he loved very much. One year, he begged his father to let him go to synagogue on Yom Kippur. He tucked his flute in his coat pocket. The boy sat in the synagogue all day and listened to the beautiful praying and singing. He wanted to join in, but did not know how to pray. Then he remembered his flute and asked his father if he could play it for God. His father warned the boy, "Do not disturb the congregation." During the afternoon service, the boy asked again if he could play his flute, and again his father warned him not to. Finally, the time came for the cantor to chant the Nila service, the closing prayer for Yom Kippur. Suddenly, the boy could not hold back any longer. He took the flute from his pocket, put it to his lips, and played the sound that he felt in his heart. His father became angry, but the rabbi turned to him and said, "All Yom Kippur, I have prayed hard so that our sins might be forgiven, but I felt that my prayers were not heard. When your little boy played on his flute, I knew at once the gates of heaven had opened. The boy's simple song to God came from his heart, and through him, all our prayers were lifted to heaven. Please stand in body or spirit. We're going to sing a hymn, number 216, out of the blue hymnal, or the gray hymnal. Martha is going to help us with the words.
We're just going to sing this twice through.
Excuse me. Steve's going to help out with this part so I don't get the kids a cold. So, if the young or young at heart could come forward, I need your help in telling a story. We have some parts that I need you to play, and yes, if you'll go over with Steve, Steve will give you, someone needs to be a big fish. There's a big fish behind you. There we are. Someone needs to be a town. We have a town in his hand. You don't want to be, here's somebody be a town. We need someone to be a boat. Anybody can be a boat? Here's a boat. We have other fish. We have here, you can be some other fish. There we go. Fish. Fish. Another fish. Okay. Oh, she's got a fish already. Okay. Oh, and we need somebody to play Jonah. You want to play Jonah? That's him. All right. Up and yes, you can play a fish. Okay. So if you all will sit out here for just a moment, I'll tell you when your parts are necessary. Okay. So. First, we need Jonah. Jonah, would you stand? There we go. There we go. Hello, Jonah. So Jonah, there's Jonah. You have to show the guy there.
Show people Jonah.
There we go. That's Jonah. All right. So Jonah is hanging out. So Jonah will be hanging out. Okay. And God comes down and speaks to Jonah. He says, Jonah, go to Nineveh and tell the people that they are wicked and they need to change. Oh, there's Nineveh right there. See? All right, very good, Nineveh. Okay. But he doesn't do it. Jonah listens to God. He said, well, the people of Nineveh are terrible people. Why do you want to tell them and want them to change their ways? They don't deserve your forgiveness or your love. And he said, well, you have to do this. You have to go to the city and tell them to turn from their wickedness and become better people. Okay? But Jonah doesn't want to do that. So Jonah gets on a boat. Here we go. He gets on a boat. Come on up there. Get on the boat there. There we go. And so, oh. Well, not yet. He will. So, and so there are fish under the boat. So we have all the fish swimming under the boat. Come on, fish. All the fish are under there. Come on, fish. And they're swimming around under the boat. Ah, we have lots of those. Okay. Nineveh's still over there, yeah. Okay. So lots of fish. So, God still wants Jonah to go to Nineveh. And so he creates a massive storm. Can you all help me be a storm? And the captain on the boat, he said, "Oh my gosh, what's happening? This is an unnatural storm. Somebody must be causing this. Somebody on this boat did something wrong to cause the storm." And he brought everybody out on deck, and he said, "Somebody's done this. Somebody has caused us to have this terrible, terrible storm. We're going to try to find out who it is." But Jonah said, "No, you don't need to do that. You know, I'm not doing what God wants me to do. It's my problem. I'll just leave." So he jumps off the boat to drown himself, but a whale comes along, here it is, and takes Jacob, eats him, there we go. Jonah, sorry. And Jonah is in there, I'll put him all the way in there, there we go. And by some miracle, Jonah is in the whale, or the big fish, and is alive, and is just in there while the fish swims around. And there's a fish over here too. Oh, okay. So Jonah's in there for many days, and eventually he just can't stand it anymore, and he says, "I will do what God wants me to do." And so the fish spits him out. There we go. So you have to go get Jonah. And Jonah goes to the town of Nineveh. Here it is over there somewhere. There it is. Okay, go over to the town. There we go. And he tells them to turn from their wickedness. And the king of Nineveh tells all of his people, "We will wear sackcloth, and we will fast, and we will turn from our evil ways, and we will repent." And God looks down on them and forgives them. And that is the end of our story. Happily, okay. Thank you all very much. Don't go away. Give all the pieces back to the... There we go. Can I have some questions for you now? Okay, the boat, the town, and all this. Okay. Thank you. This is a bass, I think. There we go. No, stay up here. Come on. Okay. Go back. So, let me ask you a question. We might need a microphone. That would probably be...
We'll repeat.
Okay, we'll repeat. Okay, so what do you think the story is about? Okay. Almost getting digested by a whale, perhaps. Okay. Yes, even if you do something wrong, you can always change it. Okay, and you have another one? Nope, that's it. Well, according to the Jewish people, there are a few things that they believe about this. This is a story they tell every Yom Kippur, and that one of the lessons of the story is that God can reach you wherever you are, and there will always be a consequence, if you try to run away from God, God will always be there. And on a more uplifting note from the Jewish people, that, again, no matter your past behavior, if you turn away from your bad behavior and you do good, that you can be forgiven and loved again by God. So let's talk about this from a Unitarian Universalist perspective now. So, we know what the Jewish people think. What do you think about this? You said earlier that if you do something wrong, that you could be forgiven. Okay. What else? What other meaning can you get from the story? Yeah.
Wait, what?
What other meaning can you get from the story? Okay. Nothing yet?
That if you can go to nasty places like Vivo or whatever it's called and make it a better place.
You can. One person can make change happen. That's true, yes.
You can forgive people even if they did something you didn't want them to.
Yes, you can. You can even forgive people even if sometimes you don't want them to, if you don't want to. Well, let's pretend for a moment that you are a person in the story, and maybe there's some other things we can learn from the story. So, what if you were the fisherman? So what do you think the fisherman learned from the story? If you were the fisherman, what did you learn from the story?
Wait, okay. That a storm. Wait, what's the fisherman again?
The fisherman, remember the captain the fisherman blamed everybody for the storm and that kind of stuff?
That the fisherman sort of learned a lesson by not overreacting.
Okay, don't overreact, okay? What else? Sometimes when a bad thing happens, you can get angry, you can overreact, sure. You could try to blame other people for your problems. I'm sure none of you have ever done this, but blaming your brother or sister or saying that they made you do it, or a teacher was in a bad mood, that's why you got a bad grade, or But as we get older and hopefully wiser, we usually see that we have to take responsibility for our actions, that it's not something outside of us that's causing us to overreact. We have to choose how we react to situations. What about the king of Nineveh and the people of Nineveh? What did they learn? Yeah. Okay, you can let him go. Yeah.
Okay, whatever. The king of Nineveh, he learned a lesson from the person that got almost eaten by the whale, whatever his name was, and he learned a lesson by him because he was standing up for himself. So then he standed up for himself and made the town a better place.
Okay, so he helped everyone else make the town better. Yeah.
That they kind of realized that what they were doing after he told them.
That's right. Sometimes we don't realize when we're doing something wrong until somebody else brings it to our attention, right? That's right. And also they learned that if they say they were sorry and try to do better, that better things might happen. Now, here's a big question. What about God? What did God learn in the story? Or if you were God, what would the moral of the story be?
People get eaten by whales.
No.
That you don't have to make a storm when you're mad at a person.
You don't have to make a storm when you're mad at a person. That's true. That's very true.
He might have learned that it takes some time for people to do good things.
It sometimes takes time.
They have to do a lesson, but they might have to do a lesson before doing the actual good deed.
That's right. They might have to learn a lesson before they do the actual good thing.
That sometimes it's hard to forgive people, but you have to be able to.
Yes. Sometimes it's hard. Yes.
You can't get mad at someone if they don't do what you want right away.
Wow, very good, very good. And one of the things that we've heard many times today already is sometimes when you see someone doing wrong, that you love, and it's hard to not still love them, even though they do something wrong. If you let them know and you can forgive them and begin that relationship again with love. What about Jonah, our reluctant hero, the one that didn't want to go to Nineveh? What did he learn in this? What was his lesson?
Sometimes, you have to believe that you can before you actually are able to.
Right. Sometimes you have to believe in yourself before you can do something.
Jonah could have found out, if you have a problem, you can solve your problem by doing a good deed.
Right. Yes.
You don't have to drown yourself.
You don't have to what? Drown yourself. You don't have to. Yes, I agree with that.
The right sometimes seems the wrong because he thought it was wrong to tell them that they were.
Yeah, it is. That was a strange part, wasn't it? He thought it was wrong to tell the people they were doing something wrong. But it was the right thing to do, wasn't it? Okay. Well, a couple of things. I will say to you just as far as Jonah, and then we'll come to a close. You know, sometimes we all have a big responsibility to take care of. We've all, like taking a test or doing a big job. And sometimes it might feel too big for us to do. Maybe that's why Jonah was reluctant, because it felt like it was too big. Maybe too scary or too hard. And you may want to run away from it or hide under your bed or whatever. I'll tell you a secret. You know, grown-ups sometimes feel that way too. When we face a problem, we need to deal with it. And when we do, generally things can work out, especially when we have a loving group of people like this behind us in this church to help us when we're going through difficult times or having to take on a big responsibility. Just always remember, you are braver than you believe yourself to be, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and loved more than you know. Thank you all for coming up, okay? Okay.
This is a duet with Karen Campbell joining me. It was very nice of her to very last minute.
Let us know. We're going to announce it real quick.
Good morning. I'm Karen Lindebrecke, and one of many here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church and other churches throughout DuPage County who volunteers at DuPage PADS Homeless Shelter. Let's take a moment to reflect on what having a home means to you. This is what some of the 383 people that DuPage PADS served last year had to say. Safety, stability, health. And from one of the children, I like my bed, even though that may mean a pad on the floor in a room full of other people. Pretty powerful. Gratitude for the most basic of human needs. DUC has been providing support to local PAD sites at various partner churches for 13 years. PAD stands for Public Action to Deliver Shelter. Someday, we hope to be able to open our doors here once a week, like many of our local churches. This is a monumental task every month, with an average of 50 of our dedicated members joining forces to provide setup, meals, on-site overnight monitoring, and cleanup. From October through May, we serve 40 or more people in need of a home on the fourth Wednesday evening and Thursday morning at First Congregational Church in Naperville, right downtown. Summers find us at St. John the Baptist Church in Winfield, serving almost 80 people. October 25th and 26th, you'll find us in Naperville, dishing up lasagna and salad and all the fixings. Please join us. Today, we ask that you give generously to support this amazing organization that allows us to live our UU values in ways that make a huge difference in our community and to every person who walks through the door of the shelter. Our first principle says it all. We affirm and promote the inherent dignity and worth of every person. Every person. Please help PADS with your contribution. Help DUC by volunteering regularly or as you can by signing up in Creeves Hall or by return email to fill a slot on the monthly duty roster. Your help will have far-reaching effects. Talk to me, Karen Lindebrecke, Jane Kwame, or Leslie Morgan anytime about how you can help. Please be generous.
If you're writing a check, please write it to DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church with PADS in the memo line. This morning's offering will now be given and received.
May this year bring you blessings, blessings of goodness, blessings of joy, peace and kindness, friendship and love, creativity, strength, serenity, fulfilling work and dignity, satisfaction, success and sustenance, physical health and radiance. May truth and justice guide your actions and compassion temper your lives, that you may blossom as you age and become your sweetest self. In that spirit, we put together in Creeves Hall some honey with which you can dip apples in. This is an ultra-sweet dessert that is a Jewish tradition on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. You eat these ultra-sweet desserts in hopes that your year will be sweet as well. Now I invite you to stand and turn around and greet one another before you go get some apples. Let us share the love of this community with one another.